The story. I, a 29-year-old woman, have been married to my 32-year-old husband for 5 years. About a year ago, he took on a project in Europe that required him to stay there for 3 more years. Initially, we were supposed to move together, but my mother-in-law insisted that he go alone, expressing concerns about the impact on our 3-year-old son. After much contemplation, my husband and I agreed with her reasoning, so I stayed back with our son. My mother-in-law further convinced me to move in with her so that we could all live together as a family. I saw the benefits. No need for daycare or a nanny, as my mother-in-law would take care of my son when I went to work. Seemed like a win-win situation, and I readily agreed. Given our good relationship, I didn't see any red flags initially. Around a year ago, I moved in with my in-laws, a couple of weeks after my husband left. The initial weeks were pleasant, but gradually, my mother-in-law's behavior started to change. She began assigning all the household chores to me, citing their old age as a reason. It took me a while to notice, and by the time I did, it was too late. She treated me like a housemaid, and if I expressed fatigue, she would taunt me, insinuating that I was raised to be lazy and spoiled. This led to numerous conflicts between us, but each time, she would apologize with tears, and I found myself forgiving her. Whenever my husband visited, the entire family would put on a facade, behaving impeccably while he was around. It was evident that they couldn't mistreat me in his presence, as they heavily relied on him to financially support them. Both my in-laws were retired and my sister-in-law was in college, leaving my husband and me as the sole earners in the family. My own parents aren't alive anymore. My dad passed away when I was 10, and I lost my mother 6 years ago. If they were still around, I would have moved out immediately to stay with them instead of enduring this hellhole. But my hands were tied. I couldn't confide in my husband about the way his parents were treating me because I was scared of the consequences. It might sound silly because I'm an adult woman with a job, and one call to my husband could have resolved everything. But despite almost a whole year of mistreatment by my in-laws, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I genuinely like my in-laws, and they had been kind to me for a long time before this mistreatment began. I held on to the hope that somehow, someday, they would return to treating me well. However, that hope faded 3 days ago when I finally realized that my in-laws were never going to change. All the apologies they offered were just for show, aimed at pacifying me and ensuring that I didn't disclose anything to my husband. My in-laws have a family tradition of going on holiday for a week or so every year, and since I started dating my husband, I have been included in those trips. However, this year, since my husband wouldn't be able to make it, I decided to stay back and get some much-needed time away from my in-laws. I had overheard my mother-in-law and father-in-law planning to leave a week from now, but they hadn't approached me about it. A few days ago, my mother-in-law finally brought up the vacation plans with me. Even before I could express my decision to stay back, she handed me a list of chores that needed to be completed by the time they returned. I was dumbstruck while reading through the list, barely listening to whatever my mother-in-law was saying. I was reeling from what she had just said to me, and I totally lost it when I read, "Clean both loose." I lost control and unleashed a tirade at her for the next 10 minutes, berating her as a disgustingly entitled old hag. I adamantly declared that I wouldn't tolerate any of this. In a fit of rage, I snatched the list from her hands, stomped off to the kitchen, and set fire to it while my mother-in-law futilely attempted to argue with me. It was a chaotic scene, with her screaming in the background as I finally did what I should have done a long time ago. I grabbed my phone and made the long overdue call to my husband. Right in front of my mother-in-law, I spilled all the pent-up frustrations that I had been holding back for far too long. As my husband listened to my grievances over the phone, my mother-in-law continued her protests, insisting that I was lying. Despite the tumultuous atmosphere, my husband managed to calm me down. He assured me that he would take the next available flight back home to address the escalating situation. Although he had originally planned to return in a few days, he decided to expedite his journey to deal with the turmoil at home. In the meantime, he advised me to take our son and seek refuge in the nearest hotel. Taking his counsel to heart, I packed my sons and my own belongings while my mother-in-law continued to scream and sob in the background. Ignoring her tumult, I left with my son, unable to forgive the repeated transgressions that had proven their lack of remorse. For the past 3 days, I've been living in a hotel with my son, awaiting my husband's arrival scheduled for tomorrow. We are eager for him to return and resolve the mounting issues, not because I depend on him, but because managing everything alone is overwhelming. I need to care for my confused son, who is grappling with the abrupt change in our living situation. A few hours ago, amidst this tumultuous period, I received the first message from my mother-in-law since I left. It was a text expressing regret for the way she treated me. She claimed to have realized that I must have misunderstood her intentions. According to her, she assumed I wouldn't be interested in accompanying them since my husband wasn't around. Consequently, she handed me the list, presuming I would be at home and less occupied, making it feasible for me to complete the tasks before their return. In her message, she acknowledged being hasty in her assumptions and recognized that it likely upset me. She genuinely apologized for this misjudgment. She went on to mention that both of us had overreacted the other day, urging me to let bygones be bygones and put the incident behind us. Expressing a desire to start afresh, she emphasized that she regarded me as no less than her own daughter. According to her, the colossal misunderstanding was causing her significant distress, possibly even more than it was affecting me. She earnestly urged me to return, expressing regret for the past events and seeking resolution. Am I in the wrong for reacting the way I did the other day? Update 1. Hey. So my husband returned a few days ago, and things have been incredibly stressful since his arrival. He headed straight to the hotel from the airport to see me first and discuss the recent events. I walked him through everything, even showing him the text his mother had sent me a few days back. I hadn't responded to it because I knew she was just bluffing, attempting to placate me and avoid escalating the situation with her son. I saw right through her tactics and chose not to engage, a decision that was also supported by the advice I received from messages and comments here. So, I believe I made the right call. My husband, understandably upset with his family, has decided to cut them out of his life completely. I fully support this decision, as it's a tough, but well-deserved stance given the nightmarish year I've endured. I wished I could take the high road and let things go, but I simply can't and won't. I kept silent about this for an extended period, holding on to the hope that these people, who had shown me love and affection in the past, would change for the better. Unfortunately, they didn't. Their cruel behavior and insincere apologies became a recurring disappointment. Admittedly, I had started to consider my in-laws as my family, maybe even more so because I missed my own parents. However, they didn't deserve the love I had shown them, and certainly not forgiveness. The love they extended to me when I lived with my husband was directed at their daughter-in-law, not me as an individual. I was mistaken to believe that they genuinely cared about me. Their concern for my son was only because he was his father's son, not because of any connection to me. It's disheartening. But at least I'm no longer deluding myself into thinking that things could improve. I've made the difficult choice to sever all ties with this family. I've gained clarity about where I stand now, and my husband and I are making plans to leave for Europe within the next week, along with our son. We intend to proceed with our original plan, even though our son might find it challenging to adjust to the sudden change. However, given his young age, I believe he'll adapt and overcome it soon. The paramount factor for us is to no longer stay apart, and my husband shares this sentiment. Despite the fact that he can't quit his lucrative and well-paying job, I'm more than willing to resign from my job and relocate with him. Honestly, I don't have any reservations about this decision. I don't have any family here, and the individuals I once considered family turned out to be the worst people I've ever encountered. So, I've decided to let go of any ties with them. As an accountant, I'm confident that I'll find a job in Europe, and if not, I'm prepared to embrace the role of a stay-at-home mom. The prospect of living separately doesn't appeal to me anymore, and I'm determined to be with my husband and son. While my husband hasn't informed his family about our decision to move and cut ties with them, We plan to visit their house tomorrow to pack our clothes and belongings for the move. Tomorrow is anticipated to be the last time I have to see them for a while. Although I'm nervous about meeting them again, I recognize the need to rip this band-aid off, and I intend to do it soon. My in-laws don't deserve to maintain contact with me, my husband, or our son. Update 2. My husband and I are now back at the hotel, and today has been exceptionally hectic for us. We had to revisit his parents' house to collect our belongings. Anticipating drama, I opted to leave my son at a close friend's place, wanting to shield him from the potential chaos. Unfortunately, my expectations were met, and I can't say I was proven wrong. Upon entering the house, my mother-in-law, who had initially welcomed me, began to exhibit a venomously sweet demeanor, a stark reminder of how she acted during the first 4 years of my marriage before her true colors were revealed. Even my father-in-law and sister-in-law were on their best behavior, which wasn't surprising, considering they viewed us as nothing more than a source of dollars and a live-in maid. However, we were no longer falling for their facade of a happy family. They had the opportunity to play that role earlier, but they squandered it, and now there were no second chances. My husband took a direct and blunt approach, informing them that we were there solely to retrieve the items we had left behind recently, and that we would be leaving, not just their home, but also their lives. The disrespectful and utterly unacceptable way they had treated me in his absence made it necessary for him to sever ties with them. Instantly, there was an uproar. They hurled various accusations, primarily directed at me. My husband was labeled ungrateful and arrogant, accused of being spineless for allowing me to allegedly turn him against his own family. Meanwhile, I was labeled lazy, selfish, and immoral, accused of intentionally trying to break up their family to monopolize my husband's attention and money. There was a tumultuous scene with a lot of screaming and shouting, and my voice is currently hoarse from the ordeal. However, at least I managed to release all the pent-up anger that I've been suppressing over the past year. Today, it all just boiled over, and as we were leaving, my mother-in-law was in tears, still muttering about how I had supposedly ruined her life and was now stealing her son from her. My husband appeared visibly upset, which was entirely understandable, considering he had just subjected his own family to such an emotionally taxing situation for the sake of the family he chose for himself, his wife and son. Since our return, he has been silent, and I'm a bit apprehensive about what he might say. I'm hoping he doesn't express a desire to give his family a second chance or something similar, because I don't think I could handle that. If he does, I'm seriously considering leaving. Update 3. It's been a week since my husband returned, and we've been holed up in a hotel, gearing up for our flight to Europe in just 4 days. Today, my mother-in-law reached out to my husband to apologize for her recent outburst. It's become a predictable pattern for her. Mess up, blame others, then apologize, expecting forgiveness. However, my husband, being no fool, sees through this routine. We delved into a lengthy discussion about the recent altercation he had with his family. Despite appearing upset, it wasn't the clash with his relatives that bothered him the most. Instead, he was distressed because he felt he had failed to shield his wife and son from emotional turmoil. He confessed that the guilt lingered, not only for confronting his parents and expressing the desire to cut ties, but also for allowing his family to mistreat me. It dawned on him that he had been oblivious to the reality of my struggles over the past year. This revelation left him feeling like a total failure as a husband and father. Our conversation unveiled the depth of his concern for me. While I had been worrying that he might reconcile with his family, he was solely focused on my well-being. I couldn't help but feel guilty for doubting him. It became evident that my emotions had been a tumultuous mix, perhaps driven by paranoia and anxiety stemming from recent events. As we talked, my husband assured me that he had no intentions of forgiving his family easily. I, too, made an effort to alleviate his worries, assuring him that the situation wasn't his fault. I chalked it up to a massive misunderstanding on both our parts. The truth was, I had been too afraid to confront his family. trapped in a cycle of gaslighting and emotional manipulation that left me silent and enduring their mistreatment for far too long. The responsibility for our misguided beliefs about his family didn't lie with my husband. It was me who had placed them on a pedestal. They had shown kindness before I moved in, and whenever my husband was around, painting a picture of them as good, decent, and loving people. We had convinced ourselves that they would be our sanctuary when my husband wasn't present. However, reality struck, revealing that they were far from the safe haven we had imagined. The fault lay squarely with his parents, who turned out to be the antagonists in this situation. Understanding this, my husband was relieved of the unnecessary burden of self-blame. I assured him that he was nothing like his parents, and therefore, he had nothing to worry about. With this realization, when his mother attempted another fake apology, we were in no mood to entertain it. While we could have instantly blocked her, we opted to convey, once and for all, our disinterest in repairing the relationship. A mere flimsy apology couldn't undo the damage she had caused. After delivering our message, we finally blocked her. It's been a few hours since then, and my sister-in-law has been relentless in calling my husband through any means possible. She may have been the least selfish among the three, but she never took a stand against her mother's actions, nor did she extend a helping hand to me. Despite her complicity, my husband had generously contributed to half of her college tuition, and with one semester remaining, that might be her primary concern now. After a brief period, my husband decided to answer his sister's persistent calls. He informed her that while he would continue to send money for her education, that would be the extent of his financial support. No more funds for his parents, and their annual vacations were now off the table. His sister attempted to argue, but he shut her down, warning that any further interference would lead to the cutting off of her college fund as well. This threat silenced her, and he emphasized that she should be cautious with her words, especially when it came to me. There was a heated exchange, and eventually he ended the call. Right now, he's taking a nap with our son beside him. The whole situation has been incredibly stressful for us, but there's solace in facing it together as a family. I acknowledged that my husband had his struggles when he lived by himself, although perhaps not as severe as the challenges I faced. It must have been difficult for him, just as it was for me. Reflecting on the past, I regret ever letting my mother-in-law manipulate us into separating in the first place. I suspect that her ulterior motive was to have me stay here as a convenient housekeeper, taking care of all the chores she didn't want to do. It didn't matter that I had a full-time job and would come home exhausted, or that I had a 3-year-old toddler to care for. The realization makes me wonder about the inherent selfishness and cruelty in some people. She could have easily hired someone to manage the household and clean up after them, but she chose to exploit my presence to save money for their extravagant vacations. Now, with our financial ties severed, she can have her lavish vacations all she wants. I'd love to witness that. Update 4. Hey everyone, just wanted to share that my flight is tomorrow, and we're all set and ready to go. However, I had quite an unexpected revelation about my husband's family last night. Turns out, I got wind from one of his cousins that my mother-in-law has been spreading some unpleasant rumors about me on Facebook. She's gone as far as bad-mouthing her own son, making it sound like we're taking advantage of her and her husband as free babysitters whenever we need to go out for work. According to her, we leave her alone at home with her grandson for hours without bothering to check up on him, painting us as neglectful parents. But it doesn't stop there. She's also been saying all sorts of negative things about my husband's relatives. Apparently, I've been tyrannizing them while I was living at their place, making her and her college-going daughter do all the work. It's mind-boggling how she's completely flipped the narrative, making it sound like I'm the one guilty of everything she's actually been doing. What's even more surprising is her attempt to garner sympathy by portraying herself as a poor, elderly lady forced to work even at her age. It's disheartening to witness someone stoop so low simply because they were denied monetary help, all because of their own unacceptable behavior. I'm baffled by how my mother-in-law thought that spreading more drama would somehow improve her standing in my husband's eyes. He's already decided to cut ties with her due to her mistreatment of me, and her response is to escalate the situation further. If she genuinely wants my husband's attention, this isn't the way to go about it. In fact, it's only making things worse. Since this news broke, his relatives have been blowing up his phone, some to criticize him, others to offer comfort, but most importantly, a few to seek the truth. We've taken the initiative to share our side of the story online to set things straight once and for all. People can choose to believe whatever they want, and we're fine with that. We're about to embark on a long journey, and we won't be back anytime soon. My husband is even considering extending his posting for a couple more years, which means we'll be far away from all this chaos soon enough. In the grand scheme of things, this drama won't hold any significance. I'm optimistic about the future and hope for positive energy for my family and me. Stay tuned for more stories from our channel.